All right, everyone, we're back. So we were we were talking about your mom
hmm
a little bit. So how how's your relationship with her now? Has it improved at all? You mentioned that she started going to cognitive behavioral therapy. How's your relationship with her now?
Honestly, now that I've been doing my own self work and my sister has done hers as well, I feel like that her and I have become like slight guides for my mom, and I've helped her at times have new perspectives. Um, so it's been kind of nice, but it feels weird because I feel like sometimes I'm more of the mom or maybe more of the mature individual.
Hmm.
Um, but I like that she's open to listening and I can give her some guidance sometimes and peace of mind, new perspectives, whatever. Um, but we get along. It's, I don't know.
Do you feel like you talk to her about the same amount as you do your dad, or maybe a little
I
bit
talk to her
more?
a little more,
Hmm.
especially since being pregnant. I've had curiosity questions about her experiences through pregnancy and being a mom and stuff like that. But it's weird how it seems like she doesn't really remember that much. Um, because when I asked her, like, what was something you remember about me as a child? And she always has the go to of that I talked early and a lot. And I'm trying to remember, she said something else too, but it was another memory that she's already said before. And I'm like, you have very little memory of
Maybe she was just maybe that was she was just dealing with so much trauma at that time that she didn't know how to process. It all kind of feels like a blur to
yeah.
her a little bit.
I mean, like I said, she did a lot of sleeping, drinking, and, you know,
A lot of different
watching TV.
little ways to cope, kind of
Yeah.
to escape.
Yeah. She was just escaping the experience for sure.
Do you feel like maybe you also talk more to her than your dad now is because you feel like maybe your dad's fine, like he'll be okay, but your mom sort of needs you or needs that help or needs that guidance?
I do tell her randomly more than my dad that I love her, and I'll message her and I say, I love you. I hope you have a wonderful day because I
Hmm.
know that my mom still to this day has trouble coping and dealing with life. And I feel like she needs the reminders for sure, way more than my father does.
So maybe that's you kind of being the you said you feel more like the maternal figure than she does. Maybe that's kind of you stepping in and taking over, reversing that role a little bit, and
Yeah.
that's why you all communicate a little bit more.
Yeah, for sure.
So I actually don't. Maybe I know you've told me a little bit about some of your siblings, but this partially for my own selfish reasons. Wanted you to take me through like a little bit of each of your siblings.
Okay.
Tell me, like their names and like kind of a little bit about them.
Okay. Um, um, I'll start from the oldest down to the youngest. Oldest is Matthew. Matthew is in the he was in the Air Force, but now he is in the National Guard. He is stationed in New Orleans. He is very much so stern,
Mm.
but he's very introverted. He's super awkward. Um, and he likes to cook. He likes his beer, and I think he likes building stuff and working with his hands and stuff too. And he in the National Guard, he works on jet engines and stuff.
Kind of like a stoic, manly man sort of person.
Yeah, he's probably the most manly man out of my brothers for
Mm.
sure. And then my brother Ryan. Um, Ryan is in the field of computers. He makes very good money and he's been very successful with that. Um, he is more of
Real quick, how old is your Matthew, your
Matthew.
oldest?
Matthew and I are 10 years and a couple months from each other. So I'm 33, he's 43,
Okay.
right?
So your
I
parents
think
went from
so.
having like a 10-year-old to a baby again
Yes.
with you.
Yeah. Within the span of 10 years, they had all six kids. Um, so Matthew's 43 and Ryan's like just made 40, I think, because I remember he like celebrated his 40th birthday not long ago. Maybe he's 41 now. Ryan lives in Georgia. He works on computers, like I said. He does some traveling with his work. He makes good money. He enjoys his spending time with his boys. They do a lot of camping. He's got a camper. Um, and uh,
He married.
yeah, he married a woman named Ashley. He's been married prior before as well, and he's the sibling that has the most children.
Hmm.
I think he's got five kids of his own.
Kind of taken after your parents a little bit with that.
A little bit. I think there were some, I don't want to call them accidents because they've been great additions to our lives, but oopses,
Yeah,
like
that's a
surprises.
less harsh word than accident. Oopsie, baby.
Oops. I would play the game and this is what happens. Ryan, growing up, I always thought he was my gentle brother.
Hmm.
I kind of felt like that with Matt a little too, but Matt was just so like serious and you couldn't read him. But Ryan was more like the gentle soul, and the more caring, I guess, even though he didn't interact with me very much at all, but he still was those characters. I could see it in them when they interact with others. Um, and I remember when I was 10 and he had his first child when he was 18, he had Kelsey. My
That's pretty young. He was
Yeah, he was
18.
young. Um Kelsey being born and watching him interact with her, I remember being like, wow, how is he such a good dad? And he was just it naturally came to him. And I remember being very envious and wishing that I had the same experience with my dad that was so nurturing.
Hmm.
So I don't know how the hell he developed that.
Maybe he kind of went down his own uh, process to figure things out and get to that place. Or some people, when they have kids, it just sort of falls into place.
Yeah,
The instincts take over, and
it's
nurturing
natural.
side of you comes out.
Yeah,
I've definitely noticed that.
yeah,
Certainly not with
I've noticed that
everyone,
too.
but like it can happen.
Right.
So
Yeah, I've seen people doing a shift for them, but not everyone can transition into that.
yeah,
It's not natural for everyone, but for some reason for him it was. It's very natural for him, and I remember just feeling so much jealousy and wishing I had that. But anyway,
was it only jealousy, or did you feel any like did you feel like happy for him, or was
I
it?
was 10. Of course I didn't feel like necessarily happy.
Oh, okay.
I was
So yeah, I didn't.
just
When I said that, I didn't take
tense.
into account like how young you were.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, if I was like a teenager, it would have probably been a little different
yeah.
because I was able to process things a little differently when I started getting older.
You seem to look back on it more fondly now, that he was able to have that experience with his kids than when you couldn't understand and you could only feel like envy or jealousy as a
Right.
kid.
Yeah. Um, let's see. The next in line, I guess I'll go to the next brother. He had middle child syndrome. My brother Scott, if he was alive still to this day, he'd be, let's see, he was 26 when he died, and I was 19. So he's 7 years older than me. Um, so he'd be 40. So maybe Ryan is like 41, 42,
Hmm.
something like that. Matthew's about to be, I think September 1st, Matthew will be 44. Obviously, this doesn't matter, but sorry.
Oh, you're okay.
Um,
It might matter to someone out there listening.
yeah.
I have to know.
I
I'm
need specifics here.
I'm very meticulous.
Yeah. Maybe, but I don't know. Um, but I know that he was like 7 years older than me.
When did he pass?
He was 26, I was 19.
Hmm.
And again, for the audience, I'm 33. So, um, you do the math. He's been gone for a while now. He passed away from melanoma, skin cancer, and Um, but him as a person, he was always, him and I were a lot alike in the sense that we wanted to be accepted.
Mm.
So he had middle child syndrome, while I was the brat younger one that all my siblings hated because I got everything. But it wasn't that I got everything; it's just because I initiated more than they did. Um, and we had our own. We had a lot of similarities in that we like struggled with wanting acceptance. So he went through a lot of hell growing up and stuff. And I remember like he got beat up in school a lot, and he was that awkward, like heavier set kid that's like way taller than everyone else.
Yeah.
He was, you know, when he was healthy before the cancer kicked in, he was like 260 pounds, 6'4". He was
Wow.
a big guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's funny because he and I look the most alike too. Um,
Were you two close at all?
well, that's what I was going to get at is he tortured me.
Oh.
He was the sibling that tortured the younger siblings.
Mm.
Um, so he was very mean to me. There was many of times that we had some awful experiences together. One time he hit me in the head and made me black out for a moment.
Oh, wow.
There's one time that he like set my sister on fire and
Whoa. That
yeah.
escalated quickly.
Yeah, but it's not it is bad, but I without explaining the story,
Yeah.
it's
That probably sounds
it's
way worse. Yeah.
yeah, he was just being an asshole. She was washing dishes, we were doing our chores, mom was at work, and he was bitching about it, doing his chores or something, and he went up behind Blair and like lit his lighter on her shirt, and it went pfft, and it just like caught fire, but it only like burned like the fuzz off of it, and then it went away. But we're just like, why would you even do that?
Right.
So, and that I think that same day was like he would try to make me and Andrew and others do like his chores and stuff like that. And he didn't want to fucking deal with his chores because he's a freaking jerk. And I remember he was like, he was in the middle of eating something he cooked, and I want to say it was like chicken. I thought I remember it being chicken. And he was bitching about he wanted us to do his chores, me, I think in particular at that moment. And I was like, I'm not doing your chores. I was trying to stand up for myself. I don't even know how old I was. Maybe between 10 and 12.
Yeah.
Because it was just when my mom started working as a nurse. So it was somewhere probably between 10 and 12. And I was like, no, I'm not doing it. And I remember I said something to him that pissed him off. And he looked over at me with a mouthful of chicken and spit it in my face.
Oh my God.
So he was an ass for sure. But
Did it get any better
so
as he grew up?
as I was changing, and I can't say becoming my own because again, I was a lot of other people. Like my character and how I displayed myself, maybe not internal so much, but my external was and interests are often a reflection of others in my life, not
Mm.
of my own self. But he liked these qualities because I was listening to metal, and I started at 10 listening to metal, and
From him listening to it,
um
or
well, some of the bands I found on my own after like learning about metal from them, and I liked punk rock and stuff too. So I kind of went through like a weird like punk rock metal-y phase, and then I
yeah.
phased into a heavy metal plus phase, and then I got into like foreign metal and stuff because of them. I like Rammstein and shit like that.
During Gray, never listened to them.
Um,
I don't know if you got on the
I'm
Japanese stuff at
familiar
all.
with it, but I never really got into it. That was very brief for me. I was like, I
Mm.
just can't get into it as
Fair.
much.
A little face.
Yeah. Um, but eventually I was like 13, 14 when he started dating this chick named Alexis. And Alexis started to like me and stuff and realize like about things about my personality and like interests and stuff. And she was like, you have more in common with your little sister than you realize. And so she kind of like helped us connect.
Oh,
And then he seeing a new softer side of him was like really weird to me because we actually did start like connecting and seeing that we had a lot in common.
you were 13 when that started to happen?
Yeah, I was about 13, 14. Um, so that was nice that we eventually did start
That
getting along.
that happens a lot with teenage boys, I think. And I think maybe I was kind of similar because towards my family, I was always a little bit more like introverted and stoic, like as a teenager.
Mm-hmm.
But then with like uh, girlfriends when I was younger, and even like female friends, I was more like um, more affectionate and more had was willing to show my softer side a little bit more, and that kind of brought that out with my family a little bit more. I can't really place my finger on why I became more like that as a teenager, because I wasn't like that at all as a kid. But having that like female influence to make me feel more comfortable with showing my softer side kind of helped. So it's interesting. I think that kind of might happen with a lot of teenage boys.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that you were able to like come out of that because I feel like a lot of guys don't.
Right.
Yeah.
So I don't
Yeah.
know if it's just all the hormones going through you and like feeling like all these changes and not knowing how to express it sort of thing. Maybe that was part of it
Yeah.
for me.
That makes sense. To me, it makes sense.
Yeah. So that's interesting that he kind of had a similar thing. So what did the relationship kind of transition into? Did it take a while for you two to be more close or for you to see a softer side or
I mean, yeah, I mean, not until I was like 13, 14 did I see that side of him. And
no,
I,
I mean from like the time it started until like
oh, it was kind of like, I don't remember it being a fade into. It was just like a sudden change. And I
oh,
think that Alexis must have been a big influence for him now that I think about it. Um, that she probably brought like a softer side of him out that was already there. Cause I knew he was just honestly, he was this big giant dude that looked intimidating with his mohawk and shit, but he really was just a big teddy bear.
yeah.
And he just wanted to seem intimidating, probably because he got his ass whooped enough times and he didn't want to be treated the way he used to be treated. And that's the only thing I could think. He put a wall up and she
Hmm.
kind of gave him the opportunity to drop that a little.
And maybe kind of gave him that a sense of acceptance that he
Yeah,
so desperately wanted.
yeah, for sure. I
So
can see that.
that he felt like he could be more of himself because he felt more accepted.
Yeah, I can
Um,
definitely see that.
so would you say that was it still like were you ever what you would describe as close once that shift started to happen?
We never spent like a ton of time together, but Alexis would invite me over to their house every now and then, and I'd
Mm.
stay the night with them. And I remember like they would buy alcohol and let me come over and drink with them and stuff. And um, not until I got a little older would I like smoke weed with them and stuff. But mostly, I think I did very few times with them smoke weed, but it's mostly we would just like drink together, watch horror movies together because him and I both loved like really shitty, cheesy zombie films. So we would watch things like that together and laugh and like we would, I don't know, watch other horror films and just hang out,
Yeah,
barbecue, chill.
I describe that as pretty close.
Yeah, yeah. And he honestly started picking up that role of like protective older brother. Like
Mm,
he hated all of my boyfriends. And honestly, I don't know what kind of person he would have grown into being because you know he passed away at 26. He was very young. If
yeah.
I think about it mentality wise, he was very immature. So like if we go back in time and he's alive and that same mentality, he would totally think Aaron is a big puss. And my dad thought Aaron was gay, and maybe he would think Aaron was gay too. So
Sorry, Aaron.
yeah, sorry, babe. Um, so, um, but I think once he would get to know him and see how much of a fantastic partner he's been to me, that he would really learn to love and appreciate him. But he hated all of my exes and he would like threaten them and everything. He didn't give a shit. Um, Even when he was dying of cancer in the hospital, he was threatening. We had a bad hurricane when he was in the hospital, and I can't remember what was it, Isaac? Hurricane Isaac, or I can't remember which one it was, but um my ex Ryan, I was on the phone with Scott, and my ex Ryan said something snotty to me or something, and he heard him, and he was not happy. He was like, give him the fucking phone, and like he was pissed. He became protective of me.
Hmm.
Um, so
I think that was his way of showing love and expressing that closeness that you two had developed.
yeah,
Was Alexis there till the end?
she was. She's
Hmm.
also she's an LPN. She's also a nurse.
Oh,
And she helped take care of him at her home.
oof, that had to have been
Yeah.
incredibly difficult for her.
No, I can only imagine. I personally, I'm not going to delve too deep into that, but when he was dying of cancer, I stayed the night one time, and that's all I could do. I stayed with him one time in the hospital, but he wasn't as far gone. The morphine was lower, and he could actually communicate with me and interact with me. But by this time, oh, it was so bad. He,
Was it a slow decline for him?
mhm,
Mm.
yeah,
That had to have been so hard to see.
yeah,
I can understand why you wouldn't want to come over and witness that.
definitely. But in that experience, what really traumatized me was we had to take turns pressing his button for morphine and to go into his IV.
Yeah.
And by this time, he was only on what he called liquid steak and IV. He wasn't eating any solids,
Mm.
nothing. He would drink water, but it would just go straight through. It was just like hydrate his mouth, and he would like drink like other stuff, but he had a tube, and you could just see it go straight through.
Mm.
But we had to press this button for him and to give him his pain relief, and I think it was something to do with like it was my turn to go to sleep, and like I was asleep, sound asleep, and I think my dad accidentally fell asleep and forgot to press the button or didn't press it in time or the proper time pattern or something, and he started feeling pain, and he woke up screaming, and he was screaming at my mom and my dad and telling them to fucking kill me now. And I'm like, oh my God, I can't listen to this.
Holy shit.
Yeah. And he's just like grabbing them, and he's like, fucking kill me. Like, he had a baseball sized tumor on his kidney, and then he had his intestines, half of his intestines, I don't know if large or small, were removed because they were just lined with tumors. And by that time, his cancer became internal. He decided not to go through chemotherapy again. And he was like, just let it fucking kill me. But apparently, it was just like severely painful for him,
That's so hard
unbearable.
for me to even hear. I can only imagine what it felt like to go through witnessing that.
Yeah. I did visit him again, though. Um, in that experience, I mean, that woke me up around 5 a.m. And I got up and I ran to the bathroom and I put my hands on my ears. And I'm just like crying and shaking. And I'm just like, I can't listen to this. And hearing a grown man cry, just because men don't cry as much,
Yeah.
and hearing that side of a man, just wow,
Well,
that was hard.
especially, you growing up with him and knowing how like strong he'd been and how much
Right.
of a protector he'd become for you. To
Yeah.
hear someone like that cry had to have been devastating.
It was traumatizing for sure. And that's why like I struggled to come back. I think before that experience, I had a good experience with him. I think it was before, maybe after. He was not fully there, but I'll make this part of the story very short, but I did have it one good visit with him. So growing up, we weren't very affectionate to each other. Our parents weren't very affectionate to us, and we weren't affectionate to each other. There's no hugging, I love you, nothing. And that's actually something me and my sister are trying to explore more, is saying I
Mm.
love you more. And that's been a nice adventure we've been going through. But um I never had the opportunity to say I love you or show affection to my brother Scott. We just acted like friends, Like I told you, we started getting along better and it was nice, but still wasn't the affection I really, really wanted.
Yeah.
Um, but um he was laying in the hospital bed that was in the house, and my mom and Alexis were on either side of the bed and they were just kissing him on the cheek and stuff, and he's very out of it, and he was able to like kind of somewhat understand what's going on. He's smiling and they're telling him they love him and stuff like that, and I remember feeling like I wish I had the courage to do that.
Mm.
And my mom looked over at me and she's like, come here, come give him a kiss. And I was like, no, I can't, I can't. And I wanted to. We just didn't have that relationship. And then Scott said, it's okay, give me a kiss right here.
Oh,
And I gave him a kiss. And I mean, tears were like rolling down my face. I'm just like, so it was really nice to have that moment with him, even though he was very out of it.
how long after that did he pass?
Probably a month or two.
Mm.
I mean, it was the beginning of the year. What was that, like May, June? It His cancer was re-diagnosed. Like he knew it was going to eventually come back,
Yeah.
but he was re-diagnosed and it became internal. And then in that same year, in October, he died. So
Mm.
it caught up to him very quickly.
Yeah. Do you were you I know you're never fully prepared for something like that to happen, but did sort of it being uh having known about it for a little while, like pretty much knowing that he was going to die for a little while, did that help or make it worse?
I think I denied that fact.
Hmm. So it was just as devastating probably when the time came.
Yeah. It was very interesting. It was like 3 a.m. when I got the call about that he passed. And then we all drove to say our goodbyes to him. Sorry, the hiccups. Um, we all drove to Alexis's house. That's where he stayed. And um, just said, I love you and goodbye. I mean, he already had passed. And they actually hadn't for weeks heard him talk.
Hmm.
And that day, it's like he knew, and he was telling Alexis that he loved her. Um, so yeah.
Wow.
But my mom said he was on enough morphine to kill a horse. Like his dose got so high to keep him comfortable.
Yeah.
So
Well, I'm glad that you were able to have that good experience with him,
me too.
that sort of close connection before he passed. There's a lot of people that um, never get that with someone before they pass, and they deal with not having that sort of closure that they wanted. And I know no one's ever really ready for someone you love and care about to pass, but at least you got some semblance of a connection and a little bit of closure there, I think.
Yeah,
Um,
I feel good about that. The only thing is just I was young and I couldn't handle
yeah.
the situation. I wish I could have pushed through and spent a little more time with him. But I did have, like, on the hospital stay, I had a good conversation with him. Um, him, he had a talk with me that, again, this was before he got too far gone. He had a talk with me about my worth and getting my life together. And he was like, stop settling for these jackasses. And he's like, you need to focus on you, and you need to find what you want in your life, and you need to find someone that values you and sees your value, like your worth. Um, because have many times before Aaron dated people that didn't see these
Yeah.
my good qualities and like my worth. They just ran all over me. But
Sounds like very mature advice.
oh yeah, it felt really good to hear. He even he wanted me to date his friend Wilhelm. Um, very quirky, weird fella, literally like head to toe covered in tattoos, but he was just such a sweetheart and he was a great guy. We ended up going on one date together and
Mm.
we kind of did that for Scott and we hit it off really well.
Yeah.
I just ended up not dating him.
Mm.
Yeah, for many reasons. The story is long.
If it's not there, it's not there. Yeah.
I mean, we connected, but yeah,
Connection doesn't always mean a romantic connection either. So
yeah.
not sure if that was the
He
situation,
was
but
like a brother to me.
yeah.
You know, he met me when I was 12 and 11 or 12 and I grew up with him and he was also when I was 12 he was 18. So he was a chunk older than me.
Yeah.
So,
Um,
anyway, we're talking
well,
about siblings. Do we want to jump to the next one?
I
Or you had a question?
I just it's it's tough for me to ask these questions because sometimes I feel like I'm being mean or like hurtful just for being hurtful, but I feel like
You don't have to feel that way.
I know. It's tough for me because you know the way that I experience things and I can sort of like um almost feel the pain of others and like even though you seem better at managing it now and it doesn't hurt you as much now, like I can sort of like feel the pain that you went through during that time. Um what what was it like when he finally did pass? Were you in denial? Did you find what ways did you find to cope with that?
Honestly, I don't think I really allowed myself to work through it for a
Hmm.
long time. It took a while before I actually like allowed myself to feel it. I mean, don't get me wrong, I cried and I hurt. Um, but I think one of the things that really kind of helped in the beginning, to keep me more mentally stable with the whole thing was when he was dying and when he could still talk to us, he was like, I don't want you guys sitting here crying about me, mourning over me. I want you to live your best lives and go on with your life. He's like, it's okay to be upset that I'm gone, but like, don't dwell on it for the rest of your life
Hmm.
and let it alter your life and your happiness. So he really cared about, he didn't want anyone hurting.
That's so
So
big. That's so big and so like I
yeah,
mean people, twice his age, even more when they pass, sometimes aren't able to do that and to wish that on the people they leave behind. Seems
right.
like he came a long way from the
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 jerk that he was.
the jerk that accidentally set your sister on fire.
Yeah,
Yeah, it seems like he made a lot of progress, especially towards the end. And I wonder how much of that had to do with Alexis and how much had to do with going through the process of, knowing that he wouldn't be around much longer.
for sure.
But it seems like especially him telling you um, that you're worth it and to find someone that deserves you, it seems like that made a big influence on you.
I tried to keep it in my mind as often as I could. And I remember I dated this asshole, um, Dustin, total jerk. I dated him, and he seemed like a great guy initially, but he was the worst relationship I've been in. It was toxic. And I remember like one day towards the last like 6 months of our relationship, I was like remembering my brother saying that. And I could hear his voice saying those
Hmm.
words to me. And I was like, I am settling. I am putting myself through exactly what he didn't want me to do. And I felt like to honor him and also myself, the best thing I could do is walk away from that relationship. So I had to, because of a lot of manipulation and stuff that happened in that relationship, I had to find a way to trick him into leaving me. So eventually I did, and I got out of that relationship, but I still didn't know exactly what I deserved. And I didn't understand my worth well enough at that point, still.
Yeah.
Even, well, I started dating Quentin not long after I fucking left Dustin, like an idiot. But anyway,
So you kind of had you knew enough to know that you deserved better than this, but didn't
yeah,
know exactly what it was that you deserved or what you needed.
right. And Quentin was a nice guy. He really was. He had his own baggage that I didn't learn about later in life. I was with him for like 5.5 years almost.
Yeah.
He was my longest relationship. And that was the guy I was with right before Aaron. Um, and um, I just, Scott's voice coming back to me again. And I'm like thinking, I'm like, well, Quentin's not a bad guy, but at the same time, he's not the right guy.
Yeah.
And then I started that Mastery of Love book my sister gave me. And then I was like, this is what love is supposed to look like for myself and from others given to me. Like that's what healthy is.
And a lot of that sort of seems to have just reiterated the points that you learned from your brother.
Right. Yeah, for sure. And it's what guided me into, even though it hurt and I knew but I had to do it, that I had to leave Quentin.
Hmm.
And I knew that that's just not where I was supposed to be in my life. And I knew that it's not where Quentin was supposed to be either. So we were just settling.
It's really funny, like from the when you because we haven't me and you have never talked too much about Scott, is that the name of your
Mm-hmm.
brother that passed?
Yeah, sad.
Um I mean you've told me briefly kind of what happened, but when you started the story of him, I kind of expected, from how it started to you to have not having that great of a relationship and like, and it continuing that way. But then when you started, from the point you started to where it came to be and how much he was able to influence you and how much of a positive influence he was able to have on you, I mean, I think you've done a great job in honoring him by keeping those words in mind. And I think he would be happy to know that he had a positive influence on you. And I think it really puts in perspective, like, that we should care what we leave behind.
Definitely. I agree.
And I think he was able to recognize that. And I think that's awesome. Like, this would have been a much, well, an easier to process story, but a more sad story if the relationship wouldn't have progressed or changed and he would have passed.
Right. Yeah. Oh gosh. I mean, people do experience that.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm grateful. Like, while I didn't get it enough time with him from the point that we got closer to the point he passed, because that was what I was 13, 14. He passed when I was 19.
Yeah.
We didn't have much time together, but if I wouldn't have had that little time with him and that good experience, and if it would have just been us never getting along,
Yeah.
that would have really hurt to keep that inside me for the rest of my life.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Um, I don't want to make this too much about me, but I had an experience when I think I was 12. I had a little brother pass. He was, I think, 6 months or less
I didn't
old,
know that.
and maybe I was a little older. Maybe I was like 13, somewhere between 12 and 13. Um, I was really weird about babies and kids when I was younger.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was afraid to hold them and didn't really know how to interact with them. Like, I was a teenage boy. I didn't
Right. You were
understand.
young.
But after he passed, I felt so much guilt in not having interacted with him more and built more of a connection with him. And that was really hard for me. So even though he was like, a baby, like how much of a connection can you like build when they're that young and you're
Oh
not
yeah.
one of the parents? I still regretted it so much. And like that affected me for a long time.
Yeah.
Um, struggling with that guilt. And I think I I don't know. I became after that. I was better at interacting with kids, and I think maybe and I became more understanding of like because when you're a young like kids kind of annoy you or bother you, but after that I kind of became more understanding and maybe to sort of like seek that connection that I couldn't build with him. Um,
Right.
and I think it was a couple years after that that I was thinking about that made me think because before that, even when I was young, I thought like I never want kids. Um, but a couple years after that, I was like, I think I do. And I think part of it was from that. That might not be a good reason. Um,
No, I don't. I think it softened you,
yeah,
like that experience, and it made you appreciate maybe children in a different way.
I think so because I mean, at that time, I was just like, oh, I mean, this kid will grow up one day and we'll have a connection then.
Yeah, I mean
But
that makes sense to
it
me
kind of
that
made
way.
me realize, like, oh, not everyone gets to grow up. You know, get the
Yeah.
connection while you can because it might not last forever.
All right.
Um,
I think a lot of people don't realize how much even small interactions is so influential to young children. But you being as young as you were, it's understandable that you didn't understand the impact that you did have
yeah,
and how much your interactions could impact. When you're a kid that young, you're thinking like, well, it's not like I could talk with them. We could talk about something we have in common. You know
right,
what I mean?
yeah.
It just seems boring.
That was my mindset. I was just bored and like a little um nervous and anxious, like afraid to like drop him or whatever, like
Right.
but also just like boredom. Like I don't know how to interact with a kid, like with a baby.
I vaguely remember you telling me this now as you went more on through your story. Um, but I can only imagine how that guilt felt, especially you being that young, that kind of guilt, and how much that must have really hurt you.
Yeah, we me and my sister were we were we were in middle school and we were in the middle of class and we were both called to the office and that's when you know my mom was there and we were told and we left school after that. And like,
Gee,
yeah, I didn't know how to process it
I bet you didn't.
other than just like holding it in and feeling guilt. I do remember, and I
Mm.
remember this very vividly, because I felt uh, so much guilt about not interacting with him enough or not being more of a part of his life. I insisted on being one of the people to carry his casket.
No.
So I remember that feeling very vividly, and that was like something I felt like I had to do, even though I couldn't be there for him, like in life. I wanted to be there for him in death.
Yeah. Honor him as
Yeah,
much as you could.
yeah. Um,
Oh gosh.
I'm sorry.
No, I'm
I mean,
like, oh, that must hurt.
you're all like pregnant and stuff. I'm over here talking about like,
Dead 6 months
yeah,
olds.
death of a child. That's gotta be
That was very insensitive sounding. I
no,
apologize.
no.
I, since having this pregnant brain, I will tell you that I accidentally say things that come off very insensitive, and I'm like, why did you say that? Even
Yeah,
to customers, I do it.
it didn't bother me at
Okay,
all.
that's okay.
I actually had to soften what I was going to say because I didn't want to come off as insensitive to you. I was gonna say like you're over there all pregnant and stuff. I'm over here talking about dead babies.
Oh, yeah. Well, I did it for you. I
Yeah.
said
So
dead 6 month old.
yeah, so thanks. I mean, it's you know, it's something I've processed and I it
Yeah.
doesn't affect me. Yeah, some things like that affect you forever, but I mean, I can talk about it and even make these jokes and it doesn't bother me at all now, but it did affect me a lot at the time. And you know, it's tough. It's tough to say like which is worse. I mean, you know, they say it's better to have loved and lost than never loved at all.
Right.
Um, but I don't want to say I didn't love him, but that's to not have loved and to have lost, to not have that connection. I don't know which is worse. Something like what you experienced where you did get to build that connection, then lost it, or having regret of not building that connection. I think they're both bad.
I was gonna say that I feel like they're both pretty bad.
Yeah, but I mean losing someone's always hard, but from my perspective, I would choose to have built that connection. Um,
Yeah.
so
Do you think that understanding like the psychology of like the way your mind worked at that time as an adult now, like seeing a young Christian at 13 or so that you said you were, like, does it humble you a little more just knowing that you're like, I mentally at that time could not do what I wanted for that relationship. You know what I mean? Like just I feel like like for me, I can be very forgiving to others based on their age
yeah,
or like their experiences in life and where they're at in their life mentally and stuff like that. I could be a little more humble and forgiving and maybe just understanding that at that age there was no way that you could know better, know better and have tried to build a connection because most 13-year-old boys aren't going to give a
yeah.
shit about that.
I'm a lot easier on myself
Good.
now for that because I understand that. I understand my state of mind. I'm also proud of myself for recognizing what I didn't know that I feel like I should have known at the time. Like I was able to recognize at that time, oh, I made a mistake. I should have spent more time building this connection. The mistake I made after that was being too hard on myself for it. I'm also proud of myself for being able to take the initiative and insist on carrying his casket, being able to honor him in
Yeah.
some way, even being so young. But now that I've grown up, I'm able to look back, be proud of myself for those things, but not be hard on myself like I was then,
Right.
because I have the understanding now that I couldn't have known better,
Right.
and I don't think,
And that's what I was getting at. And it's
yeah,
good that you feel that way.
and I don't think many, 12, 13-year-old boys would have had like a strong, connection with a little baby, a little baby brother.
No,
Um,
a lot of them don't.
yeah. So I don't think I'm that unusual in that way, but I think I think I learned a lot from that, and I think he was able to teach me a lesson of like um, connections, can be fleeting, so take them while you can get them. And I probably struggled with a little bit of FOMO, fear of missing out on connections for a while after that. Something I still struggle with, but getting better at it. Um, so we should probably finish moving down the line of your many siblings.
Any siblings? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm glad in your experience, by the way, that you have learned some lessons through that. And I have honestly, in my experience, even losing my brother, I have learned that there's always something that you can learn about life, even in the darkest moments.
Oh yeah.
So you just gotta look for it. You gotta
And
look for those lessons.
that's sort of kind of the meaning behind the show is the tagline is you can learn something from anyone, and that's kind of why I wanted to start the show so that if anyone listens, they can learn from a deep dive of the experiences of other people, even if they're not famous or like super extravagant or I don't want to say anyone that's been on here is not extraordinary. I think you're all extraordinary in your own ways, but
Yeah.
maybe people who don't know you just from hearing a brief synopsis of your life wouldn't think you were. But if you dive deep, you can learn something from anyone, and I think everyone's kind of extravagant in their own way.
I agree. I definitely agree.
Um, so who's next in line?
I was about to get with that.
Yeah.
Let's see. So is Matthew Ryan Scott. Blair is the next one. My sister Blair, and I obviously shared rooms together. While we did live in a big house, and having so many kids, you're bound to have kids sharing rooms. So, I always loved her stuff, and I would dig through her stuff, and she would beat the crap out of me. Um, and she always had this like stare like this at me. And she would just look at me like I'd talk to her and she'd address me like if she's turning to listen to me, she'll she was so mean.
And
But
how much
anyway,
older than you is she?
let's see. Blair is 38 maybe.
Hmm.
Um yeah,
So maybe like
probably
five
37 or
years.
38 right
Yeah.
now she is. Um so she's just a teenager and didn't want to deal with her little annoying sister.
Yeah.
But anyway, she was always very tomboyish and um we were very different in a lot of ways. I always thought she reminded me of Daria.
Life is unfair.
um Definitely she's was always just that like straight, dull girl. I don't know how to explain my sister. She dark when she was younger. She's blossomed so much over the years. Um but normal siblings didn't get along, beat each other up kind of thing. Um, she ended up being the more successful sibling, like I mentioned before. She did the whole graduated high school, got into college, found the great guy, got married, had kids, and then for some reason the pattern just like shifted for her
Hmm.
and her husband cheated on her and um she had to go through a divorce, and I feel like ever since her life seemed to go perfectly, whatever,
Yeah.
according to like my mom's standards, perfectly.
Yeah. I'm sure there were struggles from the inside that other people
Oh
didn't
yeah,
see in
for
this
sure.
perfect life.
Right. My sister had really bad anxiety. She's been hospitalized for her anxiety and stuff like that. So she definitely had her share of struggles for sure. But after all of that experience and whatnot, and divorcing and having to raise these two kids basically on her own, she's just, my sister's been through a lot. And, but through this, in some ways, it's humbled her. And she's been working, I think, through meeting people has helped too, that have influenced her. But she started her own little spiritual journey.
Hmm.
And she's the one that actually helped put the bug in my ear for that. Um, and um, she's the one that gave me the Mastery of Love book. She was actually on a trip by herself in like at a cabin in the woods. Um,
Oh wow.
yeah, by herself in a cabin in the woods, and she read that book during her trip. Um, and she was like, "I feel like you need to read this." But it wasn't her first book to start her journey. She'd already been delving into it. She just felt like that was a good start for me. So she's really helped me a lot. I know I can see like I never feel like someone's better than the other, but I could see in different areas the growth difference between us and the
Yeah.
areas that she's stronger than I am and that I'm stronger than her.
Do you
Um,
two talk pretty frequently, like, and talk about
Daily.
that? Okay, and maybe help each other along with your growth and your
Oh
journeys now.
yeah, for sure. We help each other a lot with like, maybe she'll explain or I'll explain a story of like what's going on in our life at that moment. And we give each other new insights and perspectives on things and maybe help us better understand what we're feeling, but also like maybe the person that we're talking about that we're upset with, like give us a new perspective so we don't feel as angry and hostile towards this person, to understand like maybe this is what's going through their mind and in their life. And it's just a nice way to just humble ourselves to make us less angry, and we can address the issue or whatever with the person in a calmer manner, and be able to have better communication instead of just feeling all this anger or frustration. snapping at people because that's easy to do when you're in the moment.
Did do you think she's the sibling that you're closest with now?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Okay. Yeah, you
Yeah.
said you guys talk daily, and I said that's pretty close.
Yeah.
Do you kind of remember what the transition period was like? Because you said you two didn't get along growing up, and he was like kind of mean to you. Do you remember when that kind of like started to change?
Honestly, I remember her becoming nicer to me when she got to move out and she went to college.
Mm.
When she would visit, like she's just being nicer to me, but we weren't like really close and spending a lot of time with each other. And this could be my pregnant brain why I can't remember, but I just remember in more recent years, probably around when I was dating Quentin, we started getting a little closer.
I'm kind of hearing a trend, and it seems like the relationship between your mom and your dad really kind of trickled down to the rest of the family because the trend I'm kind of hearing is whenever someone got out of that house and moved out, they treated you better and they became like a nicer person overall.
Yeah,
So maybe it was just kind of a toxic environment.
I would say.
Hmm.
Yeah, I would say when it came to like my parents, especially, there was a lot of like tension and
Yeah.
toxic energy that came from that.
Yeah, even if it wasn't like directly focused at the kids, and they didn't
Right.
get caught in the crossfire too much, like when you're a kid, you can feel that. You
Oh,
witness
yeah.
that, you can feel that energy. And that's what I mean, if you're around that all the time, you can feel that animosity and that toxicity between two people.
Yeah, for sure.
So it's interesting that you said a similar thing with Scott, is that he moved out and started being nicer to you. Um, and then you two
Makes
became
sense.
closer, and then now similar with Blair.
I think it's just being able to step away from the environment. I think you're right in that it just gave them an opportunity to reflect more on
Yeah,
the experience.
kind of room to breathe,
Right.
probably.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
But you don't really remember a period where you two started becoming like where you became close, or what was that starting point?
I remember. I think before she had her kids was probably right before she started having children is we started going on like hikes together more
Hmm.
and hanging out more and stuff. Um,
Was that you that sort of initiated that, or was it her, do you think?
I feel like it's her.
Hmm.
I think she did. But again, my memory is just so like blurry these days
Yeah.
that I'm trying really hard to remember, but I'm
Oh, you're
like,
fine.
I
I'm
can't.
I'm just curious. It's always interesting to me when relationships change, like what changed them, like what the jumping off point to that transition was.
I don't know. And that's another great question I can ask a sibling is
Hmm.
like, what is your memory of that transition for us? And like, what do you think influenced that transition? So
Yeah.
I'd be curious to ask my sister that. We're close enough to where I could easily ask her.
And with this situation, some of it I'm sure is just getting older, just growing up,
Right, maturing.
maturing. Um, But I mean, sometimes I think with a lot of siblings, even when you grow up, if you were, treat each other badly when you were young, you might not necessarily treat each other badly when you grow up, but there might not be anything there, or
Right,
there might not be, you might not treat them well.
right, right.
And it seems like you two treat each other very well, and
Oh,
she's a
yeah.
lot nicer to you now than she was when you two were growing up.
I feel like that's just for some reason the standard sibling
Yeah.
like relationship that we had, but especially two siblings sharing a room that had such an age gap.
Mm. So
Um,
that was who you shared a room with.
mhm, yeah.
How many? Because there were so the six of you and your parents, so eight people. How many rooms were there between all of you?
There's in our childhood home there were three bathrooms and four bedrooms.
Okay, so there was definitely some sharing going on.
Yeah. For at one point I eventually got like my own room and like I think the oldest got like his own or something like that, and we had to like some of us had to like share and whatnot. If that makes any sense.
Do you think growing up with so many people helped you at all to be it's I don't know how to word this. Because you've been around some only children, I'm sure, and like they're much more unwilling to share, maybe,
Hmm.
or not knowing, like, or maybe having trouble not being the center of attention. Do you think growing up around so many people and so many siblings helped you to like be able to share resources or share a living space a little bit better?
I would say it definitely made me grow up to be like an individual that's not like materialistic and needy of things and stuff like that because we had less, and I feel like there was a lot of sharing.
Yeah, the more people there are, the even if you make decent money, the less there is to go around.
Yeah. I
Especially
mean,
like,
I wore hand-me-down clothes and I had
yeah,
hand-me-down toys and stuff like that. And I occasionally get like some new stuff,
yeah.
but
I think probably only children are more likely to be more materialistic because they're the one that's spoiled and babied and
right, they receive a
um,
lot more.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that was a good lesson.
Yeah.
I don't know if it makes up for all the negative ones, but
Yeah. In some ways, yeah, you're right.
well, try to take. I think it's best to try to take away the good and carry that with you, and then just learn from the bad. And I think you've done a really good job of that so far.
Thanks.
Yeah, anytime. Is that the end of the siblings? Oh, there's more. Okay.
There's one more.
One more. All right.
So my brother Andrew was a very neurotic. Okay. Being a individual that kind of just picks up the energy of others, and kind of can feel others. When I was around him, I felt more anxious. I felt more like it, he had like ADHD, and he was later diagnosed with bipolar, and he was all over the place. His emotions were up, down, up, down, up, down very abruptly.
Yeah.
And I was actually afraid of him, because he was the sibling that would be violent. He was not afraid to be violent. Um, and I always like feared that like he would hit me. And I mean, there were sometimes he did, but I meant like enough to really do
To actually
damage to
hurt
me.
you.
Yeah, I felt honestly for some reason, and I'm sorry if you ever see this video, Andrew, but um I was actually genuinely terrified of my brother Andrew.
Hmm.
He was like a ticking time bomb to me. I was afraid that he was just at any moment he could explode. And he honestly still deals with anger management problems. Still to this day. And um
Was he still pretty introverted despite all this
well,
explosiveness?
that was the one I was telling you that I think that he might have had a little of extroverted
Oh, okay.
qualities. But he did like doing his own thing. But at the same time, I think about it and I'm like, honestly, he was more social than I was in some ways.
Hmm.
But he had his selective friends, and he had very
Yeah.
few that he would spend time with. And he loved skateboarding and he loved rollerblading and bikes, and that was his thing. He was really into like getting outside and doing things, and he got into like making like videos with his friends, like kind of like jackass videos and doing
Oh.
stupid shit. And he was really into the punk rock scene, and he was an influence for me on the punk rock stuff. Well, him and my brother Scott. And so yeah, he I still to this day don't fully understand my brother Andrew.
Hmm.
I just like my mom, it's nothing deeper. But we can have good conversation. We
Yeah.
could shoot the shit and it's fine. We have enough in common. Like we both love anime, and we can talk about that kind of stuff for hours. And we both are into art, and he's a very good artist. Um,
But to go deeper and talk on uh more of a spiritual or psychological level, you haven't gotten there with him.
right.
Mm.
I also think that, and this is just like, I am not, he's not diagnosed with anything, and this is just like my feeling and like what I register from him. I feel like he's somewhere on the spectrum sometimes.
Mm.
And he also has like, he's just like my dad in the sense that he is literally, when it comes to music, he's a genius. He can pick up any instrument, fiddle with it for a fucking couple minutes, and he's got it. And I'm like,
Wow.
I hate you. How can you do that? When I got into strings class and I had a viola, I mean, he already knew how to play guitar, but he figured it out and he was already making a song like 2 hours later. And I'm like, what the hell? You're the only one that developed this from dad. And I have 6 kids. Only one developed my dad's talent with music. And
How often do you speak to him?
I talked to him actually not long ago. Um, I enjoy our talks and stuff. He's sometimes hard to talk to because he has his ups and downs and stuff, and
Yeah.
he's had some episodes that were very scary. And he has definitely frightened us many of times.
Was he ever been able to talk to you about these experiences or these episodes he's had?
Yeah, he has, and he just says that, um he just needs family. He just needs love and support. And it's like sometimes you don't know how to give it to him. And when
Yeah.
he gets in those like neurotic states, he's not there. And you
Right.
just have to just sit there and listen and let him just word vomit. And you could just feel the emptiness in him, but like the pain in him and like confusion. Um, but
And sometimes it can be really hard to be there for people going through that, especially
oh
when you're
yeah,
going through your own stuff, because it
for
takes
sure.
so much energy to just absorb that from someone else.
Yeah, he drains me. When
Yeah.
he's in those states, which he hasn't done in a little bit, but when he's in those states and I get to talk to him, it's really, really hard for me as the type of person I am that he could suck all my energy and resources right out of me.
Yeah.
And then I'm just left feeling anxious and worried. Um
Does he have
so
is he able to maintain like friendships and like relationships with people outside of his family, or does he struggle with that?
he's got his select a few friends that he has had for many years. He's got
Mm.
his friend Jude that he's had since we were kids. And Jude is a fantastic human. And I really appreciate that he is a part of my brother's life because when Andrew had an episode at one point, I was in 20, nope, early, right before I moved here, early 2018. Um, he had an episode and I'm at the hair salon and my dad's calling me and my dad is crying and he's just like, Andrew is not making any sense. I don't know what's going on. um he just was having an episode and my dad was like, I don't know where he's at. He said he came to Louisiana. He ended up like stealing money from his work and running away and leaving his wife and kids, or a kid at the time, he has now two, and came to Louisiana. And he was like, I just needed family. That was his explanation. He was like, I
Mm.
was having a breakdown. I needed family and I needed people. And I think he was maybe having issues with his marriage and stuff like that too. So he didn't feel that he could go to his wife
Is he
for.
still married?
Yeah,
Okay.
he's still married to her. They ended up having another daughter as well. Um,
Well, I'm glad that he was able to find that.
yeah. Well, my dad was like, I'm stuck at work. I can't help him. I don't understand what's going on. Blah, blah, blah. Can you call him? And I try to talk to him. Andrew's not making any sense. And eventually he got a hold of Jude. And Jude was able to calm him and recenter him and everything and get him in a safe place. And he ended up staying with Jude for a while. And I'm like, I'm so glad you have him because like I don't know how to handle like this type of behavior and
Yeah.
like this mental stuff that he goes through. He's he's a handful. But
Well, I'm
he's
glad he does have someone who's able to handle that. Someone who probably knows him
yeah.
better than anyone.
Oh, he does. Yeah, Jude's been around forever and he's like a brother to him and he's the brother that he deserves to have. So I'm glad he has him.
Well, I did not expect to go into such a deep dive and into each member of your family, but it's been really interesting. Like that's why I just wanted to keep going. It's like because not only is it can I understand and people listening and watching understand more about you through where you came from. I can understand and it's also it was good jumping off points to other topics like snippets into other little parts of your life and your experiences growing up. um, so it's been really interesting. You know what would be fascinating to do one day?
What?
um, this podcast ever gains a large following and I have the money to invest in something like this or pay people to be guests, to go and after this, like talk to each of your siblings, have the same sort of conversation, and talk to each of you and have you all describe each other and what your relationships were like and how they developed. How interesting would that be? That could be a
That would be interesting.
documentary.
Yeah, because I'm curious. I've never asked. I'm curious how they perceive me. I mean, the
Yeah.
way my sister talks about me, she speaks very highly of me, and I have a lot of trouble believing her about who she perceives me as. Um, but yeah, I'd be curious. Like, I have no idea, especially my older brothers. I don't know what the heck they think of me.
That could be a really interesting kind of experiment for you and maybe a good jumping off point to build better relationships, or maybe reignite relationships that have fallen to the wayside with some of your siblings to just be like, hey, maybe send them this podcast, and be like, hey, I'm curious. Maybe talk and be like, hey, I'm curious. What? Yeah, maybe not send it to them, but maybe just talk to them. Be like, I'm curious. I'm just wondering how you've been. I'm curious, like how you perceived me growing up in our childhood and what it was like. They might have a lot to say about it, and they might be happy someone asked.
Yeah, I'd be curious to know about it
Yeah.
for sure. I've never asked their opinion. If anything, I kind of feel a little fearful to know because, I perceive myself as nothing great and that I'm like a failure and I did all these things wrong for so long in my life. And I feel like they would just reiterate that to me and I'd be like, oh, yeah, thanks for confirming.
Well, I doubt that. It's difficult with family and people that care about you to get like an accurate representation because
Right.
they might just say whatever it is they need to say to not hurt your feelings. I think we're all guilty of that, and
Yeah.
I think mostly honesty is the best policy, but I think honesty needs to be productive. And if there's like, I describe like unproductive honesty as like honesty that can only serve to cause pain. Um, and they might perceive it as that. And who knows, it might be true. Um, if you were to ask, you might go into it with like, oh, this will be a fun little experiment and a fun little exercise, but what they say might hurt you. So it might be if they were to alter the truth, it might be wise of them to do so. So I don't know.
I'd still be curious though.
Yeah, yeah. Um, but I'm glad we did that. I would love to have you on again because I think going through your spiritual journey, because I think it's been really interesting and really enlightening to me, having had you help me through some of mine and through some of my growth to dive more deeply into your experiences and how that started and where you're at in that now. But I think that needs to be probably a whole episode. We could probably talk for hours on
Yeah.
that alone.
That topic, yeah.
But before we go, I just kind of want to ask you about your pregnancy and how that's been and what that little journey has been like and how you're doing now.
Um, well, um, at this time I am Tuesday I'll make 27 weeks.
Yeah.
Um, she was definitely not planned, but not avoided.
You're right.
Um,
You weren't trying to, but you weren't trying not to.
right. I mean, we were trying not to most of the time, and I, long story short, thought that I couldn't get pregnant.
Yeah.
I thought I might have had like PCOS or fertility problems, and that's why I was like, we were, I guess, more chill about it and didn't try to avoid. But we communicated like we both wanted kids, and we both communicated that it was okay if we got pregnant, we'd make it work and we'd be happy. But we're not necessarily trying. And um, it's just funny that it ended up happening. I don't know if you want me to share the story, brief story of when I found out and how I found
Oh
out.
yeah, please.
um, when during the time before I found out, I was going in for fertility testing and like figuring out like, is there something wrong with me? Do I have PCOS? And I was talking to someone and she's like, oh, this sounds like you definitely have PCOS and blah blah blah.
I remember
We're gonna,
this story.
yeah. She's like, we're gonna give you some do some blood work and stuff and just see how everything is. And so I scheduled for some blood work and I eventually went back and I got the blood work done. And they're like, oh, these levels are like really off, but at the same time, they don't make sense. And the LH and FSH levels, which is your ovulation levels, were very low. And I was like, okay, what does that mean? And they were like, oh, that could mean that you have a tumor on your pituitary gland. It could mean many things. I'm not sure, but we're gonna recommend you over to a specialist, and you're gonna see a endocrinologist and go from there. So I am like the anxious individual that I am, the worry wart that I am. I'm like freaking out, and I after I hang up, I'm like, I'm in the Kroger parking lot. I'm like searching all sorts of stuff. I'm like, what the fuck could this be? Like, what? What else causes the LH and FSH levels to be low? What is the symptoms of a pituitary gland
And
tumor?
anyone with any kind of anxiety issue knows that WebMD is your worst enemy.
Yes, you should not play Google Doctor.
No, don't do it.
Yeah, everybody has
Anyways.
Google. Switch that around. So I was looking up the symptoms and stuff, and I was like, I don't have any of these symptoms of a tumor on my pituitary gland. This doesn't make any freaking sense for me. I was like, it's got to be something else. What's going on? And then, like, one website, after hours of searching, one website was saying that sometimes in pregnancy that your levels will be low. And I'm like, there's no way in hell because we only had one boo boo that month.
Yeah.
And apparently all it took was one boo boo. Um, and I went downstairs because I was in bed and I was in my pajamas and I was like searching and stuff. And I went downstairs, put my shoes on. Aaron was like, and I grabbed my keys and he's like, where are you going? And I was like, I'm gonna go to the dollar store because what I read online is said that sometimes these levels being low isn't necessarily a tumor on your pituitary gland, but it could be pregnancy and it could be like other malfunctions um, in your lady parts
Yeah.
that help stimulate ovulation. And so I was like, let's rule this out. I'm just going to go to the dollar store and pick up a pregnancy test. So I get to the dollar store and I had trouble finding the tests. And the guy, the cashier, he was so sweet. He showed me where they were, and he was like, as he was handing me, he was like, I hope this is a good thing. And I was like, it's not a bad thing either. I was like, it's not a good or a bad thing. So he was like, all right, well, in that case, I hope you are. And I was like, yeah. I was like, so anyway, I get to the house and I'm like, okay, I'm going upstairs. I'm going to go take a test. And I pee in this little cup thing and then I do the dropper and I put the drops in, instant 2 red lines. And I'm like, my heart starts racing. I start shaking and I'm like, what? 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 I was like, do I say something? And I always envisioned that I was going to tell Aaron in like a happy, cute way.
Yeah.
But I'm like panicking, freaking out. And then there was no way that I could say it with a smile on my face. And I'm like, no. I'm like, no, you were supposed to come later. Like, I want you, but you were supposed to come later. I like had all this planned out of what I was going to take care of before she came, or he or she. Um,
Hello, Carly and Aaron's future child. I hope you watch this one day.
future future child, yeah, a little girl. So I was freaked out and I tried my hardest to change my tone of voice. And I was like, hey, Aaron, at the top of the stairs, on the couch in the living room. I'm like, hey, Aaron, can you come see real quick? And he was like,
Mm.
it's positive, isn't it? I literally went, come here right now. And I screamed at him. And he's just like coming up the stairs, he's big cheesing and stuff. And I'm like, I hate you right now. You look way too happy. I'm not ready to be happy. And then he said,
You're like, why are you freaking out?
I wanted him to freak out because I was freaking out.
Yeah.
And because I wanted to be happy, but I couldn't in that moment.
Yeah.
And he was just like, we're gonna have a baby. And I was like, no, don't talk like that right now. Do not talk to me like that right now. I was so upset. I was like, no. So it was very hard for me to initially accept, but it honestly took weeks for me to
Really?
accept. I was pretty upset about it, but I think with my like OCD and perfectionism, I had this like pattern of how I wanted my life to look like before I had a child.
Yeah.
And that completely just was like someone just took a eraser to my mental dry erase board and it's just over. Like,
That's why you were kind of like, no, this isn't the way it's supposed to be.
yeah. But the universe said, yeah, it is. Sorry. So yeah. It's been an adventure.
Would you say that that first part of like learning to accept it, learning to be happy about it was the hardest part, or is there something else that's been more of a struggle about it?
you know, probably that was the hardest part about it. I will say one of the things that I've really come to love in a weird way about it is that due to my experience growing up and like looking at how my mother was towards me and how she negatively impacted me, I literally can see those things clear as day, and I could see the type of person I don't want to be,
Mm.
and also knowing that she will be here and I will be an influence for her just as my mother was. Even though my mother was so silent, she was still such an influence to me. And seeing that impact, just knowing that it helps me to strive to be a better version of me, and to set a good example for her in many ways. Um, so it feels good knowing that I have that in mind and it can help me to teach her to be a better woman than I had the opportunity through being taught through my mother. So
I have no words. That's beautiful.
yeah, so I'm excited
And
about that.
I can definitely say, like, at least from my perspective,
Mhm.
talking to you before you were pregnant and after, um, the early stages, your accepting stage was difficult for you, but you seem calmer and less anxious and more sure of yourself ever since you became pregnant.
I will say that since being pregnant, I agree with that to an extent, but the anxiety has actually increased.
Hmm.
But I think that situations are causing my anxiety to increase because, again, with having Ryan live with us and stuff, and that being the space that's going to be the nursery, I haven't been able to prepare for her enough. I feel like all I've been able to prepare for is like bringing stuff in,
Yeah.
having no place to put it,
Hmm.
and then like mentally preparing. But outside of that, like I'm just now transitioning to preparing for my body for her and more of my mind for like the birth and stuff like that.
Maybe some of that's rational anxiety, like anxiety that makes sense. Like you had actual things to worry about there.
Right. I mean, I will admit I've had like brief moments that I'm keeping in check because I know that this can be common, is like thinking of dark things and awful things that could happen to her. And
Yeah.
I'm like, I've had thoughts where I'm like, why am I bringing a child into this world? This world's freaking evil as fuck. Why would I do that to her? And you it's weird that you like love someone so much and you've never even met them. And I'm like, I want to protect you,
Yeah.
but I can't protect you always.
Yeah.
You're gonna literally be a little free bird flying out the nest eventually. And
And I'm sure some of that is like just an evolutionary thing to
yeah,
prepare you for the worst that could happen.
maybe
So
so.
yeah, so your mind kind of starts to think of like, oh, what if this bad thing happens? What if that bad thing happens? To sort of prepare you for motherhood and what could happen and how to deal with it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Because I've pretty much every pregnant mother I've ever met has talked about that.
The fears.
Yeah.
Yeah. My sister said that after she had her kids, it was worse. Like postpartum depression, stuff like that
Mm.
will cause a lot of that. Um, and she experienced a lot of that. So, knowing her experience, I'm hoping that I can keep that in mind as I go through being a mother and trying to keep it in check
Yeah.
for sure, because it can lead you down a rabbit hole that makes you, I mean, to the point like still to this day, my sister doesn't walk away from her kids when they take baths. Well, I say that. I lived with her in 2019 and she was still, and they were, at that time, they were 5 and 7. When they would take baths, she would always leave the door open so she can make sure if she had to walk away, and she would stay in there because she had a fear of them drowning.
Oh wow.
Um, and then like Athen would lay on his belly in the tub and put his head underwater, and that would freak my sister out. So her anxiety and her fear of like something happening to her children like really just controlled her a lot. And she still has, I think, some anxieties and stuff. I don't know if that one is still um, relevant,
And hopefully
but
you can kind of take from that and like be aware and try to be aware so you don't helicopter parent too much and
right.
like
I don't want to do that, and that's true. I definitely want to keep that in check because I know that when you are a helicopter parent, you make them lose so many opportunities to experience things and like new things, and um you kind of understand like, a kid, everything's new to them.
yeah.
Everything's new. And you don't want to like cause them to lose an opportunity to experience something new that could end up being such a great, either a great story one day, even if it had turned out bad, like Aaron telling stories about him hurting himself as a kid and stuff,
Yeah.
and a lot of people telling funny stories of their when they broke an arm or something like that. You just gotta let your kid experience life.
Right. Yeah. I mean, no one wants their kid to get hurt.
Right.
But a lot of those are like character building experiences
Yeah.
and you learn and grow from those. And that's sort of how kids seem to learn like what's safe and what's not just through experiencing them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, oh, if I do this, I'll get hurt. Oh, if I do this, this will happen. Cause and effect.
Right.
Um, so you kind of have to learn a lot of that through experience as a kid. Because it's so hard when I can almost remember this. It's hard, but if I think back, I can almost remember being a kid and not being able to fully understand or believe. Like if someone just tells me something, um, like it's so hard to learn, um, through other means other than experiences when you're a kid.
Mm-hmm.
Like experience is the most direct route to learning when you're a kid, I think.
Oh, for sure.
Um, so you mentioned that you have that you've kind of I can't remember how you worded it, but you have become more aware of what you want to pass on.
Mm-hmm.
Um, how much of that do you think is just this giving you the opportunity to reflect and the realizing the realness of the situation and realizing like holy shit, like I am going to be a mother, I have to do this. Do you think there's also some like physiological or hormone changes that have influenced that realization in you?
I can't say for sure because actually, right before I got pregnant, I was in the middle of working on my emotional eating disorder.
Hmm.
And the book that I was working through wants you to delve through your past and your childhood or wherever in your life that may have led you to be like an emotional eater. or emotionally dependent on food and stuff like that. And during reading those books, that book series, I was just like, I want to fix this side of me and heal this side of me before I have a child because
Mm.
my mom didn't work through her demons and therefore created a addictive personality to cope with her life. And I learned that from her. I learned how to deal with life problems through unhealthy coping skills. I mean, I was drinking some too. And when I first moved to Kentucky, when I was living with Tracy, I was doing a lot of drinking. I mean, sometimes during the day and like all the time. And I was struggling with coping. And in that chapter of my life, I was struggling. And I think my mom was a big influence in that in a lot of ways.
Mm.
And so just going through those books and learning a lot about myself, I was like, I realized how much others, even though you're just around them and seeing them do these actions, how much they can have an impact on you. And I don't blame my mother by any means. I'm not like, yeah, the reason I'm fat and I'm unhealthy mentally is because of my mom. I don't blame my mom
Yeah.
for any of that. She had her own trauma and she didn't know how to deal with it. And I empathize with that. I had my experiences and my traumas that I didn't know how to deal with until later in life. And my mom's just a very late bloomer.
I
She's
mean,
just been working.
we just spent like 2 hours describing like even just how your siblings affected you and what those relationships have taught you and what you learned from those. So yeah, like literally everyone around you when you're growing up is going to have an impact on you and affect you.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, we barely dabbled into into all of that as well,
Yeah,
and there's so much more details to that, each relationship and how they influenced me and who I
yeah,
am today. But um just knowing these things, I definitely I want to do motherhood differently.
mm,
And I want to be it again, it's not only a motivation to do good for her, it is to do good for me because whatever good I do for myself is actually a reflection of good that is done to her. Just like, for example, if my mom would have worked through her trauma and worked on her, that in turn would have affected me in my
yeah.
childhood and my upbringing. But it's crazy how much your own inner shit can interfere how you are as a parent and how your child turns out and stuff. And so many people accidentally don't work through things that they don't realize that need to be worked through. And there's something called family constellations. I don't know if I've talked to you about that
Yeah,
before,
you
but it's
mentioned
like
it.
passing on family trauma in a
Yeah.
way. Um, and I just want to break that cycle. I feel like my sister wanted to so bad, but given her circumstances in her life and her late awakening, um, she's really struggled to be able to offer that to her children because she didn't get the opportunity to work on herself enough before having them. And I'm not perfect. I know that I'm going to mess up and I'm going to have to accept that there's no way I'm going to do this parenting thing perfect, but
Oh,
I'm going to,
everyone does.
right.
I
I'm
mean,
just going to try my
if you've
best.
never done it before, and even if you have done it before, every small human that you bring into this world is going to be different and require different things. And it's going to take some time to learn what style of parenting and what type of nurturing they require. So there's no way to be perfect at it from the beginning.
I hope that she ends up being more like me. And you know what? I'd be
You,
happy if she ends up being like her. I mean, no matter what, she's like her because
yeah,
she'll always be her. But I always um I even though I was like a complex child, I was a very sensitive, gentle inner child. And
yeah.
I hope that she has that. Although I was very sensitive and Aaron's aware of me being an HSP and which stands for highly sensitive person, and it makes me more sensitive to my surroundings and to people. And we've mentally prepared ourselves that if she ends up being like me, that means that she would probably have those qualities. And Aaron has learned to adjust to those kinds of my adjust to those traits of mine.
Yeah.
Um, but
Well, you will be good practice for him parenting her then.
right,
If she does end up being more like you.
yeah. But I'm again, that's something that's a weird thing. Like you want them to like, you kind of want them to be like this little person. Like you have an image of what you'd like them to be like, but I try to keep that open and not overthink it
Right.
because I want her to have the flexibility to be who she is.
It's kind of like, have you ever like read a book and then you sort of had your own image of what the characters would look like
Hmm.
in your head, and then you saw like a movie or like a television show like remake of it or adaptation of it, and
Hmm.
they look nothing like you imagined them?
I know exactly what you mean, and there's very few like books I've read and then watched movies,
Yeah.
but as stupid as this for me to admit, Twilight was like that for me.
Hmm.
I was like, I did not envision these characters to be like
Harry
this.
Potter was like that for me.
Yeah,
Some of
I
them.
never read the books.
Oh, well, that's a mistake.
Oh, well, I hear they're great and they're way better than the films, but the films are
Um,
actually pretty
no,
decent.
they are. Both are good. Both are
Right.
good.
It's not like, oh, I can't say it's not like Twilight because the books aren't necessarily the best either. Um, but yeah, they did do good. I read part of the first book, but I was pretty young when I got it from the book fair at school,
Yeah.
and it was
Hmm.
above my grade level, and I remember being like, I don't understand. And also like words, there's weird Hufflepuff and like all
Right.
these weird things. I'm like, how do you pronounce that? What does that mean? Where does that word come from? And I needed answers and no one could provide it for me.
Yeah,
It's
that's
just fantasy and
understandable.
I didn't get it.
Yeah, I guess it's kind of like that with children. Like you have in your head, like envision how you think they're going to be, and but I don't know if it's right to do that.
Yeah,
That
I
might
feel
be a
like it's
dangerous path.
expectations.
Yeah,
And
maybe
it's
don't put that
not.
on them.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm trying to stay open-minded. I think that like
But it's also got to be hard because like you got to be like excited and have some anticipation. Like how can you just have think about her with like a blank slate in your head? You have to like imagine a character in some ways.
right.
Like put a character to the person that you know is growing inside of you. Otherwise, like how are you going to because I know I would do the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah, you just like you could daydream about like I don't know, you like playing Magic the Gathering. Like you're
Yeah.
daydreaming about like whether you had a boy or girl that they would eventually want to
Right.
play with you. And
And
that's what Aaron kind
how
of
can you
envisions.
imagine any scenario as a parent without imagining what the child's going to be like, you know? And
Right.
of course you're all you're thinking about right now, or a big portion of it is like what it's going to be like to be a parent and how best to do things and how to care for the
Right.
child. So you have to imagine like a child in that scenario.
For sure. But like something that I think about is like um as you know, I feel very deeply about certain things, especially nature and stuff. And it's like these feelings I feel about certain things, I want her to experience those sensations.
Hmm.
And those are the weird little expectations I have. I'm like, I'm a very like curious, whimsical kind of individual. I'm very playful. I love creativity. I love nature, and I like want her to be curious like that with me. I mean, I love nature so much that I watched a video on microorganisms and I started crying because I thought it was so beautiful. I love biology. Um, and I just am intrigued by things like that. But you can't force your kid to be into that. You can introduce
Yeah.
it to them and see how they feel about it. If they get into it, great. If not, you need to learn to just release that.
I think you can teach curiosity, but I don't think you can teach someone to have the same feelings as you do about a particular thing. So
Right.
you can
Right.
teach curiosity, but they might be curious about completely different things than you are.
Right.
So I think as long as you keep an open mind with that, and maybe uh, that'll give you an opportunity if they're curious about other things than you, give you an opportunity to learn and become curious about the things that they like.
Yeah.
So I think we're gonna go ahead and end it there, and
Okay.
I think you're well on your way to not passing along the any of the trauma, and I think you're going to be a fantastic mother, and I think Aaron's going to be a fantastic father, and I think you're
Thank
both
you.
going to be great. And I can't wait to meet the little one.
Same here. I'm excited.
All right, well, thanks for coming on, and thank you for being a guest, and I hope we get to do this again sometime soon and go more into your spiritual journey.
That'd be great. Thank you
Yeah.
for having me.
Yeah, of course. All right, thanks everyone for watching. Bye.